A man simply slapped his boss's secretary on the buttocks and was then asked by his boss to work overtime or be fired in order to keep his job. Tom had no choice but to stay and work late. However, when he walked out of the office in the early morning, he saw the company's accountant being shot dead. At that moment, he hid behind a wall, not daring to make a sound until the killer dragged the body away. Only then did he find a chance to hide in the restroom. Little did he expect that the security guard was also killed by the assassin. Tom was terrified. At this point, faint footsteps could be heard from outside. Tom quickly closed the restroom door. However, the killer's purpose for entering was to obtain the keys from the security guard's body. So, just a second before the killer entered, Tom squeezed through the gap into the adjacent stall. Unfortunately, he accidentally triggered a motion sensor. In a moment of desperation, he stepped onto the toilet seat and flushed it the instant the killer stood up. After the killer left, he hurried out, wanting to call the police. Fortunately, he ran into Jack, who was also working overtime. He told Jack about the killer and then led him in an attempt to escape. However, they discovered that the elevator had already been shut down by the assassin. So, they had no choice but to try the fire escape. It turned out that this exit was also locked by the killer and couldn't be opened. Tom told Jack to find a way to get his phone and call the police, while he himself went to notify the boss who hadn't left yet. But when he arrived at the office, he couldn't find any trace of his boss. At this time, Jack also rushed back to his own desk. However, the first thing he did was call his wife. After just a few words, the killer came up behind him, motioning for him to hang up the phone. Then, the assassin took out a wire and killed Jack. When Tom arrived at the scene, he found it was pitch black with no sign of Jack. He realized that Jack might be in danger. So, he crouched down, came to his own desk, and then picked up his phone to call the police. However, it was only then that he discovered his phone was dead due to a drained battery. Having no other option, he had to charge his phone first. But when he turned around, he saw Jack's corpse. Before he could react, the sound of a door opening came from behind him. He quickly squatted down and crawled into the corner to hide. He listened as the killer's footsteps got closer and closer. He hurriedly ran to the storage room at the end of the hallway, observing the other person's movements. Fortunately, the killer was on the phone and didn't hear any noise, but seeing the killer walking towards him, he trembled in despair, preparing to launch a counterattack the moment the assassin entered the room. But at this critical juncture, a phone suddenly rang. What will happen to Tom's fate next? We'll see you next time.